Alright, so really quickly getting into Dawn of the Infinites, Murozond's Rise here, which, in my personal opinion and experience, is the much more difficult of the two Dawn of the Infinite dungeons, both tyrannical and fortified. Maguses and Vanguards. Vanguards only have one mechanic that we're worried about. Vanguards cast a frontal, and technically the way it reads is that it is within 8 yards of their target. It's much more a frontal because your tank should be 8 yards away from you, unless you're stacked on your tank. So, if we consider this a frontal ability that the Vanguard is casting, it does cast a frontal rending cleave ability that will hit both the tank and any DPS that are near the tank. So, worth noting, not so much important for Warlocks or for other ranged DPS, probably, but definitely worth noting for any melee DPS, especially like demon hunters, monks, things like that that do move around a lot or have a lot of mobility potential. It is very easy to get clipped by that and take a lot of extra damage, or potentially even die if you get 2 or 3 stacks. On fortified 4, 5, 6 stacks, becoming very deadly even for a tank. Taking 2, 3 stacks for a melee DPS is very likely to spell death. So that's really the only mechanic we're super worried about on Vanguards. But on Maguses, we're also kind of concerned about their cast. So they have 2 casts, which is Epoch Bolt Volley and just Epoch Bolt. Epoch Bolt just does tank damage, great Curse of Tongues target. Epoch Bolt Volley, or actually, I don't believe it's Epoch. I believe it's actually it's Epoch Bolt and then Corrosion Volley, something to that effect. Corrosion Bolt Volley. That does group-wide damage, so very important interrupt knock on that. So worth noting on all these keepers, their effects that they throw out, so like the bubble that Valo puts down here, or the orb that Maiden throws out, will affect both enemies and allies. So you can actually stand in the bubble that Valo puts down and take reduced damage. You can aim the orb from Maiden through these mobs, which will only target range. So if you are the only range in the group, you are solely responsible for this. You can aim it through the mobs, and it will do damage and stun them. So very, very good time save there if you're good at aiming that. I'm going to go ahead and skip through this a little bit here. We are also, as Warlocks, very good at dealing with this keeper in particular for the interrupt, because we can't just leave our pet on this keeper. And you can just solo interrupts. So nothing super cool we can do for this boss. You can provide a Warlock gate or use a demonic circle over here, or the far side of wherever your group is tanking him, to help get orbs during Siphon Oathstone. But in my experience, I don't understand why this is the case, but almost everybody always runs for the far side anyway. So just trying to occupy whatever space your teammates are not is definitely your job during that period. Worth noting, this is anytime you see this blue around a debuff, that means it's a magic effect, means Imp can dispel it. So unfortunately, Spark of Tyr does do a big burst of damage when it's dispelled. So double dispelling is probably not the play. But if your healer dispels, heals everybody back up, and you want to go ahead and dispel yourself, or your healer calls for you to dispel yourself or dispel somebody else, you can definitely help. It's very possible to get both of these dispelled before a Dividing Strike, which you do have to soak, which can be very, very helpful for ensuring that everyone can soak that without having to awkwardly get into that the Dividing Strike area. So this would be where you would soak, and having this cleansed on both party members can be very, very helpful. Worth noting that otherwise, outside of dealing with any of these other mechanics, you will definitely want to be facing kind of away from the center here, as anyone other than the tank, so that this portion here, which on Mythic Plus or on mythic difficulty would leave a puddle, similar to the way Dividing Strike left a puddle. So you would want to face that off the platform so that you have as much space as possible to play the boss. Always worth it to defensive the Infinite Fury from these guys. It is basically the only damage on these pulls, and it is a shitload of damage. My advice for that maze is if you are the first person through, it's totally free. You can almost just run along either of the sides and you will get through almost completely free. If you're directly behind someone, be a super gamer or probably just wait, quite honestly. If you're the first person through, it's super easy to do. Quite honestly, because they will throw all their abilities at you, which will mean that they will land slightly behind you as long as you are far enough away from them. Whereas if you are slightly behind somebody or reasonably behind somebody, then the abilities that are aimed at them will hit you. So it's the unfortunate case of everyone's trying to rush through. It may be better if your group is disorganized to possibly wait a few seconds, let them start to get through, and then once they kind of teeter out, or once some of them start to get through, go ahead and take your turn in that case, because it is definitely much more difficult to deal with that maze when you are not the first person through. Here on this pack, very quick, simple thing throughout there. Always target the right Drake here, the diversionist, excuse me. This is the one that does the Infinite Fury in the pull. It is the one that is doing the group-wide damage. The other one does the Tank Buster, which your tank should be able to live as long as they rotate defensives properly. Target the Diversionist. Infinite Burn, if this cast does go out, you can dispel it as well. As your healer, with Imp, it is a, again, blue icon, meaning it is a magic effect exclusively. There's a little bit of tech here that I'm going to show off in just a second here, which is, very technically speaking, the way these portals work is there is one Rift Mage tied to each portal. So there's only 2 portals. There's 4 Rift Mages. You technically only have to kill the 2 Rift Mages that are tied to the portals to progress. Typically, people will kill all 4. You technically don't have to. I am going to show you that I'm going to kill all 4. But something you can do that is totally free to do is this exactly here. You can take a Warlock Gate right here from anywhere here to this portal once the Rift Mage is dead, and it will activate the RP. So that your tank does not actually have to clear all the way over to this portal and all the way over to the other portal. So that can save a few, honestly, quite sometimes 20 seconds, depending on how aggressively they're pulling this room. So potentially save quite a bit of time there. And you can also put a demonic circle back here so that you can immediately take the demonic circle back. I'm going to just clear back because it's a little bit simpler. But you can put like a demonic circle like right here next to your Warlock Gate and just take it right back. And you can do this on either side, the left or right side, and you would do it on whichever side you do not plan to kill the boss first. So if you're going to go Morchi first, you would want to gate the left side. If you're doing Battlefield first, you would want to gate to the right side. Because you don't want your whole team, your whole group to have to take the gate as well. You're just trying to save them time, save your tank time. I do want to show off some gate skips that are very, very cool here. So very technically, these mobs you can just run around. You can. If they're all the way to the right, in the case of this one, you can run to the left. And in the case of the other one, if they're all the way to the left, you can run to the right. But it's kind of tight. It's an uncomfortable amount of close. So you can always Mind Soothe this if you have a priest, Mind Soothe, and then it's completely free. You just run right by him. But if you don't, you can also Warlock Gate it. Warlock Gate's super free, just like that. You have to wait until the mob's kind of to the opposite side from where you have your Warlock Gate in order to take it. You'll actually see that I had a little bit of a difficulty here on this gate in particular after this boss. So I am going to go ahead and kill the boss. Morchi is super straightforward. Don't be behind your tank so you don't get hit by Sandblast. More problems, look for the one that doesn't have a hat on and get behind that one. If you're not sure which one it is, and you'll actually see, I'll show my more problems here just a second. This is worth noting. You don't have to actually be next to or even behind or anything like that the specific Morchi that it is. So I just run to the side. This cone, and you'll see what this cone covers. I'm actually safe. I don't get hit here. So it hits most of the platform, but you can actually just cover like a whole side here and you'll be fine. So that can definitely eke out a little bit of extra uptime. Potentially a little bit unsafe, a little bit. The next mechanic that she would do following this is to lay down time traps, which are the brown swirlies. You don't want to run into those. The next one is familiar faces, which spawns a like future copy of yourself. And you do want to kite that copy into one of those time traps, unless you have a way to stun or knock all of them for an extended period of time or root them. That's probably the most common one, is to mass and have everyone pixel stack or close to pixel stack, summon all 5 of the familiar faces, walk away from them, and then as soon as they become active, have your druid mass entangle them, and you can just leave them. One thing worth noting, when you do have one of your ads hit a time trap, it does apply a dot to the entire group. That does roll, so it does stack and does refresh when it is stacked. So if you are at 3 stacks, you're almost at the 4 or 5 stacks. It's like 1 second left on it. Probably try and have your ad not hit 1 until it falls off, and then hit the time trap afterwards, so you're not rolling a big debuff that your healer's going to have to heal through. But aside from that, this fight is super free as long as you can do really the more problems. Is probably the hardest part of this fight. As long as you can do that portion of the fight, typically pretty free. So I encounter some issues, unfortunately, with this Warlock gate. And this is the danger of some of these gates here, is that they are a little awkward to actually get down. And you see that I take it a little bit early. Guy was not all the way to the correct side, and so I end up pulling the pack. I just end up taking a death because I don't really want to fight the stuff. So now I appropriately wait. This is almost the exact same gate location. I appropriately wait for him to walk all the way away from where I'm going. And then I take my Warlock gate. And even with the mob spawned, which is a much tighter margin of error there, I still managed to skip them. So definitely still possible to do. And of course, these are at level mobs. These are at level because I am doing this on heroic. This is the same level they would be in a mythic plus key, so they would have aggroed. They would have the exact same aggro radius as they would have in a key. So worth noting that. These mobs you can just walk around. I imagine most everyone has seen this or is aware of that. You just walk around them. You can mass entangle those without getting into combat. So if they're like a very awkward pathing and you have a druid, you can just have your druid mass entangle them. You should also be able to rop them, ring a piece them, to avoid pulling any of them. Although a little bit more awkward. These personally, worth noting, when you're targeted by the volley, and this is regardless of class, you can stand still until you have the big mortar targeting you. When you have the big swirly you have to actually move out for, and it saves you a ton of room and causes this trash fight to be way less hectic if you do just stand still outside of melee. Don't be in melee doing it outside of melee. Outside of that, as a warlock or as any super tanky or very tanky DPS, you can eat the kabooms, the sappers that spawn. Just defensive them. Single defensive is enough, in my experience. Just a single dark pact makes me far tankier than I reasonably need to be to not even have my HP move. In my opinion, they don't cast Rally Cry fast enough, like often enough, to be worth Curse of Tonguesing. the mobs here on this pole. But the spell itself is really fast, in my opinion. So I would still Curse of Tongues these in most keys, unless you have a designated kick order already set, like somebody specifically targeting the mob, ready to kick it. The heal on this guy is no big deal. It casts quite a bit slower, but the rally cries do cast pretty quickly. So this fight is something that I have seen probably more mistakes on this fight than on any fight in Mythic Plus in current dungeon set. So regardless if you're fighting Grommash or Lothar, they are the exact same fight. You should always tank him here facing this way, and either at this approximate midpoint or further back towards the edge that's behind me. This is where he should be tanked. This is approximately where everyone in the group should be stacked when the boss is just normally active. So not in Bladestorm. That's because you want to bait these shockwaves away from these mobs, these green mobs. He will kill them with shockwave and get a stacking buff for every single one that he kills. So you don't want to give him that buff. That's why you're baiting the shockwaves this way. And if you do get targeted by Bladestorm, you also want to take the Bladestorm away from those mobs. And the other thing is these axe throwers. They're the same as the archers that spawn. These are the most dangerous mob in this boss, and that includes the boss. They will cast Serrated Arrow or Serrated Axe, and it puts a really nasty dot on whoever gets hit by it. Now, the trick to dealing with these is you go send a melee DPS to go punch it in the head, and as long as it's being punched in the head, it won't cast anything. It won't cast Throw, it won't cast Serrated Axe, it won't cast Serrated Arrow, whatever. So whatever melee DPS you have them go over there and punch it in the head. Even if it's the tank, doesn't matter. Needs to die fast and needs to just get melee punched in the head so that it doesn't kill everyone in your group. The Slayer does both the tank buster and the group-wide damage, so this is the scariest dragon in the dungeon. Very possible that it kills your tank, very possible that it kills your group. Sending CDs on this on any fortified week, totally reasonable. Sending CDs on this, short CDs, like 1.5 minute cooldowns as far as like trinkets and stuff like that, super reasonable to do even on Tyrannical. Probably, unless you are like lusting the start of this boss for some reason, reasonable to send 3-minute CDs. Super reasonable just to kill that fast. This boss is super straightforward. If you're a ranged DPS, you'll be targeted by Infinity Orbs. One of your ranged DPS needs to just sit in it, not for the full duration, but at least until the debuff from the first orb dropping goes off. So a good rule of thumb for this, in my opinion, especially as a Warlock, is if you have, if you are the one responsible for staying in the orb, which you probably will be, in my opinion. I think that Warlock is the best for it because they do want to just kind of stand there and turret anyway, and they have a lot of options that help them do that. So if you're the one who's responsible for doing it, I would probably just put a demonic circle down on every single one. You go stand in it, whichever one you are supposed to be holding, it is probably just going to spawn on you. Immediately drop a demonic circle, and that demonic circle will help you if you get hit by a volcanic. You can immediately demonic circle back down, because if you do get hit by a volcanic, the ball will start to drop, and that can be very dangerous, because if 2 balls drop on a very high key, you are going to nearly wipe the group, or potentially wipe the group. So volcanic, demonic circle back down, or for entangling, taking your demonic circle teleport also cleanses entangling, so it makes so you don't have to run out of that as well. So both of the kind of the forced movement affixes can be handled by Warlock as well. So just kind of quickly moving through this, keepers are the primary target here. Damage that you do to Deos does matter. Deos by default, I think he starts at 15% in phase 2, and all the damage you do to him in phase 1 carries over. Something to that effect at a reduced rate, potentially. Typically, he'll come down at about 10 to 14% HP. regardless of how much damage you've dealt to him. But damage still does matter on the boss. It still does affect his phase 2 HP. But these keepers are primarily what you're going to be hitting, because the phase 1 is time gated. It is based on when these keepers spawn, and keepers will spawn additional adds and will blast the hell out of whoever has aggro on them. When 2 keepers spawn, cleaving them, totally fine. No reason not to. Deus does not come back down until these 2 die. So you're not necessarily in any sort of rush to position. You do have plenty of time after they die. Typically, what we do in the groups that I am in is when Deus is doing this infinite corruption, is we group up approximately here in the middle. Wherever you group up doesn't really especially matter, as long as it's consistent, as long as everybody knows where you're going. And then we just run in a direction, dropping the sand approximately right on top of each other's sand, so that we save as much room as possible, because the room in this is somewhat limited. It will eventually clear itself out, but it is still somewhat limited. And then, of course, just finishing off the boss is just a repeat of mechanics. So that's mostly everything that I did want to go over in Rise. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please absolutely do check out some of the other content available on my channel, or catch me live at twitch.tv/Kadalis. Please follow so that you can receive live notifications for when I am streaming. And please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on the video.